So for quite some time now, I upload weekly sound design videos to my Patreon, and there are a few things I do quite often and I wanted to share them with you today. As always, I added these ideas from this video to the PDF of tips and tricks I keep on updating. It's also available on my Patreon together with the project files from this video and from many other videos. And the first idea is using the effects layer device to create multiple processed layers and get more complex results. So here I have a simple sequence with the polymer, right, and now in the effects slot here I will add the effects layer. Right, and let's say that the first layer will be the delay plus. I just click this layer and then you can see I can add here more effects. So the delay plus. Right, and then in the feedback loop I will add a pitch shifter with an octave up, so it will go all the way up, 12 semitones. Right, something like this. This will be the first layer. The next layer I can add another one with a couple of blur devices and maybe the filter plus for some movement. So I just double click here, I add the blur, maybe I will solo this. Right, this is now just a second layer. Maybe two blurs a bit different from one another. And then the filter plus for adding movement, maybe with a band pass filter, a bit of resonance and movement. Right, and then I can add another layer, let's say with a bit 8, again I will just solo this, and the phaser plus. Something like this, maybe with some wave folding, right? And now I can mix the layers, so I will take the levels all the way down, right here on the effects layer itself, and then I can start mixing them in. So this will be the delay and pitch shifting. And then the blur and filter plus. And then the bit 8. Right. So we have something much more complex. Again, this is without. And then with. Right, so this is one way of creating something much more complex. I have here another example with an ARP. Right, also here I'm using the effects layer, and you can see I have here 4 different layers. I can start mixing in the first one. This is filter plus and blur. Then I have here a pitch shifter, another filter plus, another blur. Then the delay 2, again with pitch shifting. And then another blur distortion, filter plus. Right, again without. And now with. So it's just an easy way you can add layer after layer after layer and convert something very simple to something much more interesting. I have here a few more voices, a kick, a bass, and some maracas just for fun. Another way of doing this is by using EQ to shape the different layers. So here I have a pad with a polysynth. Right, and I have here already the effects layer. Now the first layer in this case, this is going to be the original layer, so the main voice here without any changes. So I'm going to name this original. Right, and now I can start adding layers on top of it. So something we can add, for example, is the delay plus. Let me just solo this delay plus, and maybe again a blur device. Now we already have the original signal, the dry signal right here with the first layer, so we don't need again the dry signal going through the delay, so I'm just going to take the mix all the way up. Right, so now we hear just the signal after the delay, the wet signal. Right, maybe after the blur I can add, let's say, the bit 8, just to make this a bit more crunchy. Right, and now I can use an EQ to set all of this to a specific, maybe anti-alias on, to a specific range, right? So I'm going to add the EQ 5, maybe take the lows out with the low shelf. Right, and then sculpt here the highs. Right, maybe not the totally highs here, but... Right, maybe this is what I want to have on this layer. Right, and then I can add another layer, let's say with a pitch shifter. Again, solo it for a second. In this case, I'm going to take this all the way down to an octave down, and again mix all the way up because we already have the original signal, the dry signal. And then in this case, I'm going to add some distortion. Right, maybe something like this. Maybe also a chorus. Right, maybe this one. And then also here I can control the frequency range. In this case, instead of an EQ, I can just use, for example, the multiband FX2 device. Right, take the lows out a bit. Right, and then add some reverb for the high frequencies. Right, so again we have another layer that works on a different frequency band. Then I'm going to add even another one with the amp device, again just solo it for a second. Right, and in this case, after the amp, I'm going to add the flanger plus. Right, something like this. And this will be just on the lows. Now I can already take on the amp device the higher frequency down. But we always get from the flanger also, we always get some higher frequency. So what I can do again in this case, instead of an EQ, I can just use a filter, for example, a low pass filter. Right, and close it something like this. So now this works on a different frequency band. And again, now I can mix them. Right, if I unsolo this, now this is the original signal, dry signal, and I can mix the other layers. This will be the delay plus, pitch shifter, and the amp. Right, again without, and then with. Right, again we get something much more complex. I have here another example with a ride. Let me just play this. Right, again I have the effects layer, I have the original signal or the original layer or the dry signal. Then I have here a filter plus, blur, and again EQ. Then I have another one with a pitch shifter, frequency shifter, and again an EQ, sort of an EQ with the multiband effects too. And then another pitch shifter as a delay, and again with an EQ. Right, so again, we get something much more interesting without and with. Right, also here I have more voices, a bass, a kick, and a snare. Another device I use quite a lot is the chain device that allows me to control the mix of a whole chain as one effect. So here I have an ARP with a polymer. Right, and now I will process it, let's say with a pitch shifter. This will take it an octave down. Then the phaser plus. And then another pitch shifter to take this back to the original pitch, so an octave up. And then maybe a blur device. Right, so this is my chain, this is the effect that I want to get. So if I change the mix of the individual devices, this will change the whole effect. This will change the sound. Right, which is not what I want. I want to control everything together, and this is where the chain device comes in handy. So I'm going to add this before everything, then select the devices, place them inside the chain. Right, and then I have here a mix control that will control the mix of everything together as one chain, as one effect. Right, so maybe something like this. Another nice thing about the chain device is that you can save the whole chain as a preset and then use it in different projects. So here I have a sequence. Let me solo this for a second. Right, and I already have a chain saved. So I'm going to load this. This is bright space. Right, and you can see it loads the chain with everything inside of it. Frequency filter, frequency shifter, frequency shifter, pitch shifter, blur, chorus, right? And we have again the mix control. Right, and of course this is Bitwig, so we can also modulate things. So I'm going to add a random modulator, set this to smooth and then modulate the mix. To have some movement. Now of course also on the instrument layer device that we've seen before, also there we get a mix control. So here I have a bass. Right, and I have here already the effects layer. Here we have a delay with pitch shifting, filter plus with blur, some delay, a frequency shifter, right, with more pitch shifting, and again we have here also a mix control, so I can add this as much as I want. Right, as a whole effect, the layers, I can mix them individually and then add them as an effect with the mix control. Right, of course also here I have a kick and a ride. Something I really like doing is modulating things at audio rates. This works really nicely with the LFO modulator. I have here a sequence with a polymer. I have it set with a byte module. Right, and now I have here one LFO that I will use to modulate the level of the B oscillator at audio rates. So of course, instead of hertz, I can use kilohertz, for example, and then map the B level. Right, now it's also modulating at audio rates, but it will stay at a constant pitch, which is nice if you want something dissonant. But we can also choose, instead of kilohertz, we have another mode here, pitch. Right, and then the LFO will follow the incoming pitch, the notes, which will be much more harmonic, and it's still at audio rates. And of course we can still tune this, so we can tune this to a different ratio. For example, take it an octave down by changing this from 1 to 0.5. Right, here I have another LFO, and I will use this to modulate the level of the sub oscillator. So again, I will set this to pitch and then map the sub. Right, and in this case again we can change the octave. So let's say we take this 2 octaves up by changing the ratio here to 4. Right, we can also change the shape. This will work also with the wavetable LFO, by the way. So again, if I select them, this is without. Right, and then with. So audio rate modulation can add nice complexity to any sound. Now of course we can even modulate the level of the LFO. So here I have a bass. Right? And I have here already an audio rate LFO set to a ratio of 4, so 2 octaves up. Right, and this will modulate the wave folding. But I want to add movement to this modulation, so I can take the level here, right, or the amount all the way down, and then use another LFO to modulate it and bring it in and out. We can even create something more snappy and rhythmic. So I have here another sequence. Right, I have 2 LFOs, one modulating the skew at audio rates, one modulating the fold at audio rates. Right, and I can use an envelope, for example, to bring in the first LFO, so it will be rhythmic and also more snappy. Again, take the LFO level all the way down, and then I have here an envelope that I will use to bring it in. Right, and then for the folding, I will use a sequencer to bring it in. So again, take it all the way down. And then I have here a sequencer, so this will be also rhythmic. Right, let me bring in the other voices, the bass, the sequence. I have here a ride, snare, and kick. Another type of audio rate modulation I really like is using noise as a modulation source for adding texture. So here I have a bass, again with a polymer. Right, and of course I can add noise to the mix. Right, with the noise control here. But I like adding noise through modulation. So what I will do, I will add the random modulator. In this case, there is no need for polyphony. And noise is basically randomness at higher rates. So instead of hertz, again, we will go with kilohertz. So it's at audio rates. Set this to be bipolar. Right, and now we get a noise source that we can modulate, for example, the filter. Right, and the rate of the noise here will dictate the brightness. So the higher the rate, the brighter it will be. Right, so already we get more texture. Can even modulate the filter drive. Again without. And now with. I have here also a pad sound. Right here already I have a random source set as noise again with kilohertz, bipolar, and I can use this to modulate, for example, the panning and the resonance. Right, so again we get much more texture just by modulating things with noise. I have here a few more voices before I unmute them. Thank you again for watching. I hope this was somewhat helpful. Consider joining us on Patreon. Cheers!